Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 185. I'm extremely blessed to be here with composer and Professor Emeritus from St. Olaf College, Tim Mahr. Tim, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, thanks for being here. You're, in my eyes, one of the most prolific band composers that we've had, and to have a relationship with you has been awesome. And I'm looking forward to doing what we're going to do today. So I actually want to start with right out of the gate with some advice that you might have for composers, probably younger composers, but someone who's had a lot of experience. What's some advice you might have for them?
Well, first of all, they're at absolutely a great time to be interested in composition because of all of the different tools that are available to them now. It's a completely different world as far as what they're able to listen to, which is one of the things I would encourage them to do is just really broaden their listening and try to listen with the ear that uh, sort of goes after an understanding of why is this music working or why is this music not working for me.
Hmm.
Be a little bit more analytical with it. And they have all of the electronic devices available to them for recording sound, manipulating sound. Oh, it's fantastic what they have available to them. What they don't have available to them is a pencil and some sketch pads and a piano. They really don't work as much as they should with their own inner ear, as much as having it come at them more easily. I don't blame them at all. And at this point in my career, I've composed directly on the computer right away. I've got sketch pads all over the place full of stuff that I've penciled out. But my process has a little bit of we're off topic already. This is the way this this is going to go.
We will get right back to our content, but I wanted to thank you for being such an amazing band director, that you're taking your time and listening to a band director podcast. There's many options out there, and I appreciate you very much taking in this content. I hope that you understand that your students are very lucky to have you as their band director, that you're continuing to grow, and that they are going to benefit from your improved skills as a band director. You can share this episode with any band director friends or other music education friends who can learn from this content, because good pedagogy is good pedagogy. And if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com, and you'll be able to sign up on our Patreon platform to give at least $5 or $3 a month. And it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode.
My process involves a lot of improvisation at the piano, and the tech I use is a recording app on my iPad. It's an old Sony reel-to-reel tape deck. It looks like the reels go around, and I used to, this is where my career started, and it has a real easy link up to SoundCloud. And then I can take that improvisation with me and transcribe later, listen later to it, study it, dream about it. And what I've been doing in retirement is I'll record something today. I know that I will. And then tomorrow morning, when I get up to paint, which is my new passion in life,
Hmm.
I listen to the previous day's recordings and I cycle through my thinking, and then I go back to the piano the next, that day and do it again. I've been doing that since about March. And well, first of all, with the painting, the sense that I have for sound is changing. I don't know if I'm developing any kind of synesthesia or anything like that, but it's just a remarkable connection that I'm finding personally
Hmm.
between moving my hand across a canvas and having color coming out of it and conducting gestures, for example. The speed that which you do it and what you get out of it. I mean, there are so many correlations. I'm truly in the back of my mind thinking of writing some kind of article about this. I'm just really interested in finding out if other composers have experienced this, if they've gone into other arts later in their life. God, I wish I would have done this 30 years ago.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that I'm writing right now, I think is uh, developing in different ways because of what I'm doing with a paintbrush or a knife in my hand. I just deal with acrylics down in my basement.
Hmm.
And and the first thing I do in the morning is paint and listen to my own crappy piano playing they are the ideas. And it's not that I'm trying to paint the ideas that I'm hearing. They're sort of developing completely separately. But it's incredibly relaxing and freeing and important in my life. So I feel real good about where I'm at in retirement, certainly.
So I guess the question I would ask, you already talked about how young composers a lot of times use technology, and you would urge them to use more piano and pencil paper and all that. Are there other I guess mistakes is the wrong word. What would you tell yourself if you went back to the beginning of your compositional career?
Uh-huh.
Some things that might help other people who are still starting this process.
Yes, yes. Um, to uh, understand that you're going to try to ape other composers, whether you like it or not. You're going to hear stuff, and it's going to be part of who you are. You are what you eat. That's an old saying that really applies right here. And as these different sounds are coming into you, these are the things that you're manipulating, and it just takes you time before you start to find your own path out of that sort of big collection area of all these different ideas that you've pondered already somehow over the course of time. And it takes not so much time for some people. It's really interesting. Some have a unique voice right from the get-go, and others it's they're in their 30s or 40s before we finally hear them. I know this happened to me with the when the Soaring Hawk won the Ostwald Award. That was a pivotal moment in my life because that was one of the first pieces I wrote that I wrote what I heard
Mm.
and not necessarily what I thought I should be writing to be a successful band composer at the time. This was just a sort of a new piece for me, new direction, and it was uh, received well. People bought into this voice that was starting to emerge, and that's sort of the beginning of maybe finding an original voice. And I'm continually on that path. I'm not super worried about trying to be thoroughly unique. Some artists in visual art, whatever, they feel they have to make this exacting and unique kind of splash. And I would much rather have art that really communicates really well
Hmm.
and deeply to as many people as possible. That's the draw of art to me.
My good friend Trent Austin started Austin Custom Brass so many years ago. You can call them at 816-410-0826. They ship all over the world. They have a shop in Kansas City, Missouri, and they really are an amazing sponsor of this podcast. They do trumpets, trombones, euphoniums, tubas, mouthpieces, and more, all the way from the beginner to the professional. Austin Custom Brass has worked with thousands of brass players from around the world. And you can check them out on www.austincustombrass.biz. Whether you're a student, a band director, a parent, or a player, Austin Custom Brass is your place to go for all your brass playing needs. Austin Custom Brass works with band programs from all over the country. They can provide a bid to you today. They can work within your school's budget, and they accept POs. Call their team today at 816-410-0826. Austin Custom Brass is an amazing resource for brass players and great humans, great people. You'll love working with them. Give them a call. Well, one reason I've always loved your music, and it just, I can always tell when it's one of your pieces, and I mean that in a good way. Like there's something about your music that I haven't heard anywhere else, and I don't know how to put it into words.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
Yeah,
Yeah, we just can't find the words. And this is the problem when you're up on the podium conducting. It's the problem when you're talking about supporting the arts with neighbors and friends who don't understand. It's just really a challenge to find uh, insightful way of talking about all of this. It affects us at a sort of a non-language level, and then we
absolutely.
have to find our language to talk about it.
So you kind of led me into another question I wasn't planning on. But as someone who's seen, thousands of bands through the years, if you put yourself in the role of the band director in a typical public school, right? We spend all of
Mhm.
our days focusing on the students and helping the students maximize their potential. But we
don't think as much about our conducting as how the kids are playing, right? So what are some things that maybe common band directors do that maybe we should stop doing or do better as a conductor to help our students?
Yeah, I've just did a fair amount of adjudication down in the state of Iowa this past spring season, and heard a lot of bands, uh, you know, 80 bands, 70 bands, something like that, enough, put it that way. And I came away with a similar kind of thought about that. Some of the conductors really have their groups playing musically and at a variety of technical levels. They've just convinced these uh, young people under their baton to go for the ride. And it's coming from deeper within, perhaps, and it's been developed through sensitivity training. I mean, if you're doing the same warm up every day and not really encouraging them to follow you on every little bit of information you're giving them, you're missing an opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
That happens right during the warm up time. And I'm as guilty of plowing through that as anybody. It's a little different at a college level. They come prepared to play, etc. But even still, every time you make them respond to you, you're connecting with them,
Mm-hmm.
and you're building up this relationship. It's just been wonderful in my career to have the chance to tour as much as we did with that band. We would have sometimes 10 performances on a tour, 9 performances easily, and night after night. And oh my God, by the time you get to the end of that, they are watching you a vast a majority of the time. They've just learned their parts, and they've learned that the fun is up here anyway.
Hmm.
And I'm further and further away from my reliance on the score. And as a conductor, that's been a personal challenge for me. I mean, I've done the symphonic metamorphosis of Hindemith from memory. I don't mean to brag, but it's just like that was a personal challenge for me. And this is what the professionals do. Can I do it? I mean, it was that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And luckily I got to do it so many nights in a row. That really helps. The repetition, the peeling away of these layers of obfuscation, I call it. You just can't quite get at the heart of the matter because you're still dealing with technical issues and all the stuff that over time and experience and certainly repetition, it just gets closer and closer to what the music making needs to be. And so I think that's a pretty interesting thing to ponder as a young teacher. Where do I stand on that spectrum right now? You're not expected to be a deeply seasoned conductor yet.
Mm-hmm.
However, where do I want to stand on that spectrum? What are the things that I can do to develop that path? I've been impressed with some teachers. John Thompson at New Trier High School, who had a fantastic program. Uh, he would take lessons from the local professionals. It's nice to be in the Chicago metro area to make that
Of
happen.
course, yeah.
Dick Strange did this when he taught at Temple. And it's this kind of thing where they would take a year of serious study of bassoon, for example. And by the time they had invested 10 years, 15 years of their life, they really knew the instruments. They could teach from such a comfortable level. I think
Hmm.
the main word there is comfortable. Do you sit in that chair with that sense that I know exactly what I need to do at this moment to help this kid?
Yeah, that's a lofty goal.
You bet. How to do it efficiently.
Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. As a composer led publisher, Excelsior Music Publishing provides new music of all levels for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, plus method books and resources. They're known for publishing inspiring, accessible music by composers who are sensitive to and passionate about educational aspirations of young musicians. Find your perfect back to school music at excelsiamusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com.
I remember when you were in Maine for the commission that we're going to talk about in a little bit. You were talking to me about musicianship over technique, about how you'd much rather always have a band or hear a band that is being super musical, even if they're not the most technically proficient band. I think sometimes we kind of work on technique more and we kind of forget about that musicality portion of it.
Yeah, I find that not everybody responds to that. When I go out and adjudicate, I'm one of 3 or 4 or 5 judges, this kind of thing. And I think I've got a reputation for being a softie because I'm listening for the music making more than anything. And the others are they're catching technical things that I didn't focus on at all because it just wasn't important to my ear. I don't get hired out a lot to do this either, and that's just fine. But I'd much rather hear, it's the experience that they're having up on that stage. I'm just the lucky dude out in the hall who gets to listen,
Yeah.
and what are they creating up there? Are they living out of fear of, making a mistake and ruining a performance? The competitive angle of performance is, it's not even a slippery slope. It's a thing that just goes down like that.
Sure.
And it's wonderful when you hear students who are prepared well enough. I'm not talking about a really crappy performance that has heart necessarily. Those are fun, but you want it to be prepared well enough so that the music itself is really being exposed, being shared. And this is critical stuff, and it's sort of a step in a new direction for a lot of people when they make this realization. And I come away so impressed. I'm just sitting there thinking about this past spring. I worked with a number of bands as they got ready for MMEA performances and things like this as well. It's nice to be retired. You can just get out a little bit more. And it was really gratifying to experience the dedicated teaching that's happening. The groups that I felt that weren't really measuring up to their potential, I'll just say that I had the sense that it was a problem on the podium at first. You wouldn't see any enthusiasm coming out of that persona the entire day, let alone when they're up on stage and so on, and how challenging it must be within their program. And this was Iowa, so there were some pretty small and some really strong metro area, and I heard strengths at all levels.
So
yeah.
Just thinking of Iowa, there's someone I talked to. I had on the podcast, and then I was on his podcast, Alan Fire, and he was talking about the whole concept of having perfect quote unquote music, like technically perfect, is a very new phenomenon. That this is not like an expectation from the last thousands of years. That this whole like you have to be perfect is a very new thing for us, and it doesn't have to be that way. It's about the music.
That's a really interesting observation. There are a lot of things that are changing way too quickly right now. Yeah, and that's a topic of another discussion. We'll just leave it right
So
there.
I wanted to bring up the first time I met you was in, do you remember what year you came to UNH to do the residency? We did your CD. Was that like 03, 04?
Yeah,
No, 02?
02, somewhere in there.
So you came in, and I'm even forgetting the name of the piece. It might have been Soaring Hawk, but it might have been another one. And I don't know if you remember this or not, but you're in this seminar and you're talking to us about whatever piece. And I think I was a grad student at the time, so I had done some research on some of the harmonic content of this piece. And I remember and you said, "Do you have any questions?" So I raised my hand and I said, "Dr. Mahr, my name is Kyle Smith, and I've been studying this X and Y section of the piece, and I just can't seem to figure out what's happening harmonically." And I threw out probably some language of, modes or like, showing that I knew some stuff. And I said, "Can you tell me like what's going on from the composer standpoint?" And I'd sworn it was this deep, complicated thing. And then you just looked and you looked puzzled at the piece and you sort of turned your head. You went, huh, well, I think it's just white key stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that moment to me was like, okay, I'm trying to theorize all this when the creator of the piece had no intention beyond this is white key stuff. And I thought it was gorgeous.
Yeah, let's talk about this for a while. I've been watching some memes on or what are they? Yeah, not memes, reels
Mm-hmm.
on Facebook, and they've had some really wonderful jazz piano players, and they're talking about progressions and all these, you know, wild jazz voicings and so on, and the theory behind it. And I'm thinking, yeah, it'd be cool to know all that stuff, but how does it sound? Do they really think about that when they're writing, or does
Mm-hmm.
this come out afterwards? And that's what we're talking about here. Um, yeah, I call it white key fever, and I think every composer goes through it. I'm writing something right now, and I'll work it out where my hands can make it happen. That's what happens at the keyboard, and then I'll transpose it, which is a couple clicks on a software program. So it's not always in A minor or
Mm-hmm.
some white key mode, but it gives you ready access to someone who doesn't have great fluency on the keyboard, and you have to be careful about that. But every once in a while, this was probably Soaring Hawk,
Yeah.
that all that stuff. That's just all white keys. That's just fun, you know. And in all honesty, it sort of lays well on the band harmonically where the instruments lie and so on. D minor is a fantastic sound for the wind ensemble, and I find myself just gravitated to that. And um, I'm not done exploring what a crashing low D does. It's just a great place.
So a few years ago, we were coming up with the 50th, I guess, anniversary of the assassination of Martin Luther King. And I had put two and two together that we were going to have a concert on the date on April 4th, 2018, which was that 25 years? Um, I'm doing my math wrong. Was
Oh,
it 50
50.
years? 50 years. Okay. It was 50 years. And I knew that you were the one I would want to write the piece if we could do it. And I'm glad we were able to work that out. So the piece was called Etched in Stone. And then we were able to fly you out. Did you fly out on the day and then conducted and then flew back the next morning, or so, you were there like less than
Yeah,
24
it
hours?
was a quick shot. I remember that, but it was a vivid
Yeah.
experience. I enjoyed it.
Um, so the piece is called Etched in Stone. Can you tell us just about the concept of that imagery of where Etched in Stone comes
Yeah,
from?
yeah. It came about rather quickly after you'd called and said what this was about, which I think was just a fantastic uh, demonstration of developing caring hearts within your students. As I understood it, was their idea as well.
Mm-hmm.
That let's do something special because of this coincidence. And I had been in Washington, D.C. a couple years earlier, and I went and saw the Martin Luther King Jr. Statue and display area at night when I was there, and it was pretty stunning. I mean, the principal sculpture is an empowering edifice, and if you stand in front of it, it's 36 feet tall or whatever. It's just bigger, and it gives you a sense of awe. And around it, you see etched in stone these different sayings. And so I went. That was the idea for this piece. Then,
Mm-hmm.
let's explore that. I forget if we talked about narrator and band right away, or if that came out because of our discussion about
I
the
think that was part of
statues.
your idea after you'd seen that you wanted to
Yeah.
incorporate that.
Let's share these thoughts. It was the way I went at this. That these are important words, important ideas, and if we put them into the piece where everybody in the audience would hear them said, that could be pretty
Mm.
powerful. And so that's how that all got worked out.
One of the
And
hardest.
then
Well, no, go ahead.
yeah. Well, and then, a lot of research figuring out where all these sayings were from and so on and other sayings and stuff. But I tried to focus it down. I don't believe use all the sayings that are even etched in stone,
Yeah.
for the concert work. But uh, then it became, well, put them in an order that made sense and then try to find musical ideas thematically, harmonically, rhythmically, all these different strata that would every once in a while come forward. The narration wasn't going on, so here comes the ensemble, and then it would recede a little bit, and here comes the narration, and playing with that sense of the balance was interesting. I would say these things out loud and record them and try to get a sense for the timing. And it became a really interesting project. And it led to this piece that's twice as long called Imagining Peace. And it's sayings from about 30 different people from throughout time about peace and justice. And the whole idea of being able to use our art of band music to help spread these ideas became pretty enticing. It still is. There's something very different about that experience for the ensemble when or the audience, pardon me, when all of a sudden within the concert, they're asked to listen to a narration.
Yeah.
It just catches them. They can't get up and leave. It's sort of a captive audience, and you lay it on them.
I think of a piece like Lincoln Portrait, the famous Copeland piece. Like,
Oh, you
obviously
bet.
that's a standard. Are there other pieces with narrator that come to mind? I mean, that you think of?
Yeah, yeah. There's a Schwantner piece with Martin Luther King
Hmm.
sayings and so on. I've done it, but the title escapes me right now. Um, but the Lincoln Portrait was the model for me.
Yeah.
Just the way he approached having a sort of third person narrative going on, introducing it. I don't even know if third person's correct, but somebody says, this is what's going to happen in the piece. This is information about this person, and this is what he said. And then you'd finally hear the words of the person.
The biggest pressure part for me was, I mean, I was ecstatic that you were doing it. And the last thing I would ever want to do is criticize anything, right? But however, if I remember when I see like the original copy of the score, but I know my ensemble, and that I think that's hard for band directors to say to a composer, especially someone with as much experience as you, is this probably isn't going to work for the level of my students. But I think
Mhm.
I think it's important. I'm not mean to speak for you, but I think it's important for composers to know that from the directors who are
Oh,
commissioning them. Am
please.
I overwriting this? Because if I'm overwriting it, it's not going to be a good experience.
Oh, yeah, yeah. This is at the crux of the matter. Tell me about your band this year.
Yeah.
Right now, I got to write a piece for you that's going to be successful for you, and trying to get that worked out. And it's a wrestling match because what comes out of you, if you put all those limitations on you, uh, uh, that can be sort of thwarting with the imagination. To just let your imagination go, it's a little bit more of a freer process.
Hmm.
These fingers can move really fast, and you're coming up with all sorts of stuff that just needs to get simplified. Then, you just gotta, which is an interesting process. You take that gesture. So much of music making is about the gesture that's coming out, and you take that gesture and try to boil it down to its essence. And its essence is usually something that's much simpler that
Mm.
still gives the gesture, and that's the gesture to use with your ensemble. Then so it's that kind of process. But please, composers are just trying really hard. But
Yeah.
any conductor should not be afraid to talk to a composer about what they're writing for their group,
Yeah.
and to be honest about it.
And I'll say this: I'm not a composer in any way. I mean, I've written a couple little pieces, but I do have a little criticism of some composers who are younger, newer composers now. I feel like there's stuff that's overwritten. I feel like sometimes you talk about being able to simplify what the real gesture is, and I feel like there's some pieces out there that I like to do, but I just find there's so much going on. Sometimes I feel like it should be simpler than it is.
Oh, I'm right there with you as a conductor, let alone a
Yeah.
composer.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, I've looked at that a lot of the same works probably and come to the same conclusion. I've commissioned some of these composers that would fall into this category, and you wonder, okay, what kind of piece am I going to get from them?
Yeah.
You know, and commissioning is just a chance for a composer to get up to bat. You know, and they might hit a grand slam or they might strike out, or they'll hit a, little flirty single. It's just a chance to get up to bat. And it's nice to have, it's really nice to have someone say, I'd like your next piece. And that's all they say. And so the freedom is just, it's like a big
Hmm.
blank canvas in front of an artist. Anything can happen at that point in time. Your commission, well, it's about Martin Luther King. It's going to happen on this anniversary date. And that just sort of took all the nebulous nature of, well, it could be anything. It doesn't, just like that.
Yep.
And that really helped as
Hmm.
well.
So in a minute, we're going to play this piece for everybody. But first, I want to talk about. So then you went back and performed it at St. Olaf as well,
Mhm.
and it was also performed at Midwest.
Yes, it was.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. Gary Gilroy was conducting this adult ensemble out of the Fresno Clovis area of California, and they had just gotten together for a year and made their recording, auditioned, made application for Midwest, and got picked. Ugh, God, that's fast, And I was out there doing something or something like this. We were talking repertoire. And I said, I just wrote this piece and it would be fantastic to share this at Midwest and get somebody like Alfred Watkins to be the narrator,
Mm.
and he thought, oh, that's a good idea. And within about 2 days, it was all set up, and away we go with it. And Alfred took it seriously, did a fine job. The audio isn't great from the performance, sort of buzzy with the mics that they were using or PA system or something, but they gave a spirited performance of it.
Mm.
And I was hopeful for some interest in the piece, but then the pandemic hit.
Mm.
Everything shut down. So I've got to work on getting this out in front of people again. It's nice to, talk about it here, certainly.
Yeah. So the recording we're going to play for people is your recording at St. Olaf.
Mhm.
Do you think we should play the entire piece for them or play it in segments?
Whatever you want to do.
All right. Well, let's check it out. Here is Etched in Stone, Timothy Mahr.
Illuminating words. Illuminated words, the observations and exhortations of an enlightened American, raised in the clarion voice of a preacher, silenced far too soon, are now etched in stone in his memorial in our nation's capital. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. moved millions as he spoke truth to the trials of his time. His message of hope and peace will resound for generations to come, lighting the challenging path forward. As a young activist, just 26 years old, Dr. King spoke in Alabama, saying, "We are determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream." Dr. King could have been describing his own life when just 8 years later he said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of convenience and comfort, but where he stands in times of challenge and controversy." A man of lofty ideals, Dr. King was nevertheless a grounded pragmatist, stating, "True peace is not the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice." He also commented wisely that darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Leading the nonviolent movement for justice, Dr. King shared this realization: injustice everywhere is a threat to justice anywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. When Dr. King accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, he declared, "I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits." In one of his final speeches, Dr. King shared a vision brimming of hope and promise. "We shall overcome because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Dr. King's challenge to us all: make a career of humanity. Commit yourself to the noble struggle for equal rights. You will make a better person of yourself, a greater nation for your country, and a finer world to live in.
So now that we've heard Etched in Stone, to Mahr, what are some thoughts you have?
Well, first of all, I hope everybody who heard it just now for the first time listened to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., that they heard his voice saying these important, timely words. There have been people who, I say this in the program note, they live amongst us, but they have the courage to do something about something that seems unfair to them. does not lack justice. And these people are absolutely astounding. They have such courage. And he was certainly one of them. And we have them today as well. A lot of them are quite young. Greta Thunberg, talking about all of her climate issues and so on. I mean, these people are just taking it on. I wrote a piece called Urgent Voices that was about Greta and about Emma Gonzalez and Malala Yousafzai. Three young women, all who at the age of, they weren't adults yet, but they were already speaking to the world about stuff that needs to change. And so that's what these pieces are to me, is this chance to have people think about what they were delivering and try to look at their own lives and ask, well, what can I do about this? I had this Paul Humke, a mathematics colleague here at St. Olaf, give an address, and he talked about when you're overwhelmed by what the world is giving you, just pick one thing and do something about it. And I thought that was such great advice. You're doing it with your podcast. You see something that has a need about it, and you make the effort to fill the void with something meaningful that might make it better.
So I've said on the podcast a couple times, we all have these desert island band pieces, these pieces that, like, if you only had 5 to listen to or study or whatever, what would they be on? And Endurance is one of them for me. I know we're not planning to listen to that or have a segment on that today, but if people don't know Endurance, they should listen to it. Can you give us just a little brief history about what that piece is and why people should listen to that?
Well, it came out of the Soaring Hawk winning the Oswald Award, because tied to that was a commission from the American Bandmasters Association, and that's what Endurance is. And I had read the book by the same title, and this was the name of the ship that explored Antarctica with Sir Ernest Shackleton as its captain. They were icebound. He kept the entire crew alive for 15 months. It's an incredible human story that is still taught to people. There are Shackleton conventions about leadership. There's a crater on the moon called Shackleton, I believe. I mean, the dude hit it. And it influenced me and made me write a piece of music. So that's what that one's about.
Yeah, it's great. I haven't heard a piece like it. There's definitely moments in there that sound like very much like you. But it's just a very special piece to me. So I want to say thank you for writing it. And when we were doing that recording at UNH of the CD of your music, one of the pieces that was on there, I remember playing like second trumpet or something on it. And it was like, because when you're in college, you're just reading grade 5s all day long, 6s, and you're doing all this. To read a grade 3.5 or a 4, very often if we'd read some of these easier pieces, you just kind of shrug it off. Now, I'm not saying that's right, but like in the mind of a 21-year-old trumpet player in college, and you kind of shrug it off. And I remember from the first time we rehearsed Hymn in Celebration, I just remember there was something about that piece that felt very spiritual, it just connected with me a lot. And I really enjoyed playing it. And that was one of the pieces I said, when I become a band director, I think this is a piece my students will be able to do. So at one point in the last 15 years, we bought it and we performed it. And it was just as fun to work on with my students. So that's a piece we're going to listen to here in a second. Will you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. This is a piece from early in my career. And one of the very first that got published as well. Tipton, Iowa was the commissioning high school, and it was commissioned by a guy named David Haverson or something like this. And it was in memory of Brian Bulgarelli, who was a saxophone player in the band who died in a car accident during sophomore year. And he was destined to be like the president of the band. He was a real solid student leader. And so you'll hear the saxophone get featured a little bit, soprano saxophone. This is a work that I wrote for optional synthesizer, thinking, in 1990, this is the future, but, didn't quite work out that way. And it hardly ever gets done that way. It does not need to have that covered. And it's just something that once again I improvised at the piano, and a fair amount of the hymn was just this is what came out, and then I transcribed it. I've done that for a couple other pieces as well, and this is music of the moment that just comes out of the heart, and you just take it and put it into a piece of music. You might sand it down the rough edges or whatever, but that's the music. And so that's what the beginning of that is, and then it just sort of takes off and celebrates rhythmically.
Sure does. So you've mentioned a couple times, what is the process? So when you record something on the piano and it's just stream of consciousness, right? You're just playing and then you listen to it later. How do you get it from that recording? Do you have a way to get it right onto software, or do you literally like write it all down, the parts you like, and then get it on? What is what is the piece you do next?
Yeah, I'll see if I can pull this out. This is my sketchbook.
Yeah.
And so this is just loaded. This is about 50 pages worth of stuff that looks like that, and I'm just capturing chords and whatnot. I go back and listen. It's a lot of ear training, and I wish I would have done ear training more seriously in college. That'd be another thing I'd tell these young composers is do the homework, get your ear developed better. Um, and try to capture it that way, and then go to the sketching it on the computer. I used to do it with like a 6-line sketch, with just manipulating it around like that. But I've since have just been writing on a blank full score. I use Note Performer as a sound library. I deal with Finale and have been throughout my life. And Note Performer gives you excellent sound. I mean, I had a piece that I wrote for Indiana University that we might do today.
Yep.
And the difference between what I heard on my headphones when I was writing it and what he gave me with Indiana University Wind Ensemble is scarily close together now.
Wow.
Yeah. And this No Performer is something that my students, they started bringing in stuff that sounded great. I said, "How are you doing this?" "Well, No Performer,
Yeah.
idiot. I'm supposed to teach them, right?" And for $8.95 a month, something like that, you could use No Performer, and if you use it for 12 months, they'd sell it to you or something like that, and so you could just get all your projects ready as a student, go in for a month, make all your recordings, get out of there, cheaply. And so I then go into a score that's set up with No Performer, and now I can hear all the different instruments. And I know that as I'm taking it from handwritten notation in my head, this will be in the woodwinds, and I might just put the chords into alto sax or clarinet or something like that, and then I'll break chords out as I continue working on the piece. But at least I'm starting to hear it. Yeah, this will be in the trumpet, dun, 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 and I can just play the chords in real quick. And I'm pretty quick with Finale because I've been doing it my whole life. And it comes back to me as a band, by and large. I don't mess with percussion maps so much because I know what percussion sounds like, and I get close, but that's still a clunky aspect of software that I wish they would make easier. That and a decent saxophone sound. Oh my God.
Okay, so a question I have for you. Who were some of your composers when you were younger that were influences for you, and then maybe who are some that influence you now?
Oh yeah, I'm a band geek who had I played the Holst First Suite in 9th grade at a junior high.
Wow.
I'm sure it sounded horrible. But and my conductor, God bless him, he just conducted with his fist like this and showing us beats like this for whatever the music was. But we got to experience Holst. My mom was a church choir director. I had piano lessons. I had enough musical experiences. I got my trombone, God's instrument, in summer of second grade from my uncle. So I just started playing trombone early. Got out to about third, almost fourth position,
Okay.
and enough music within me so that it became an easy thing to go into, certainly. Yeah, and the composers at that time that started to get me Chicago and Blood, Sweat, and Tears. I was arranging their music for the marching band and the jazz band, so I had that stuff going through me. Holst led me to the library, and this was back where you could check out LPs, and they'd have some listening stations, and I listened to everything in the La Crosse Public Library that I could get my hands onto. Gabrielli brass, all that early brass,
Sure.
Philip Jones brass ensemble kind of stuff, and then Hindemith, Symphonic Metamorphosis, and Janacek Sinfonietta. Now I'm back to back on a London Fur recording, FRRR or whatever that was, with Claudio Botto and the London Symphony, and I bought it and I wore it out. I have my second album of that stuff. And I've conducted both of those pieces in really convincing transcriptions. Wilson worked with Hindemith on bringing out the march, got published, but he did the other movements too. And that's what you do if you do the whole thing. And Merlin Patterson, a great arranger from down in Texas, took on the Sinfonietta, loaded with mistakes. But you clean it up a little bit, and it's a remarkable piece. And so those were the early composers. Vaughan Williams I got exposed to. I came through college, and we ended up forming a Vaughan Williams League. Herbert von Karajan as a conductor with Berlin. This is back when videotape was like an inch wide, and you need special big players and stuff. But you could see concerts finally. And that's what I'm talking about with these young kids these days. They can watch anybody.
Yeah.
Anybody who's out, and thank God that the people who have access and clearance for the early recordings of conductors know that there's an interest in that. In the last 10 years, so many more of those are available to us. You can go back and watch Furtwängler and stuff like this. And it's all inspirational. The sound, the technique. I was watching George Solti do Beethoven 2 days ago. Pays to be retired, I guess.
There you go. So you were talking about a piece that you did for Indiana University when Ensemble. There Are Giants Among Us. It's a grade 4.5. You said it's about 2.5 minutes long. We do want to play it for people here. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah. This was written for the retirement of David Woodley, who was someone who I got to know when I was a grad student at the University of Iowa, and he was a senior that year, and he was the drum major of the marching band, and I worked with the marching band. And we ended up writing together and arranging together and putting shows together and so on. So developed a good friendship. And he had a nice career that ended up at Indiana University with the Marching 100. He's a Big Ten marching band director. And illness overtook him, and he was having trouble and needed to retire. He couldn't teach anymore. And I got this call from Rodney Dorsey saying, we'd like to acknowledge Dave's work here at Indiana University and have you write we know that he knew you and you knew him. Would you be willing to write a piece, just a short little concert opener for him? Well, sure, And that's what There Are Giants Among Us. First of all, Dave Woodley's like 6'3" and big, so that way. But also just as a leader within his athletic band profession in particular, very strong. And I started to hear chords that sort of opened up, intervals that opened up and made you look up. The end of the piece has you looking up at these giants, and just a way to acknowledge their greatness and their energy as they work among us. And Dave was unable to be at the premiere. He was already in hospital care at that point in time. He saw the stream of it, thankfully, and died 3 weeks later. We had a chance to talk about the piece the week after the performance, and he told me he liked the trombone writing. He's a trombone player as well, and I put a nice theme in the bones, and just a way for me to, I already knew he was ill and on the way out, basically, and a way to musically say goodbye.
Very special. So we're going to do the score and the sound on this one as well. So here is There Are Giants Among Us. Well, Tim, thanks again for being on the podcast with me today. So first of all, if anybody wants to reach out to you and connect with you, what's a good way to do that?
Yeah, as a professor emeritus at St. Olaf College, I was allowed to keep my email there. And so it's mahr@stolaf.edu, stolaf.edu. And I'd be happy to correspond with people.
And you also have a website for your works.
TimothyMahr.com.
How original.
Launched with great vigor, and the pandemic said, nope, not yet.
Yep.
And so I've got a whole new set of music I'm working on this summer to add to that as a second collection within its offerings, and I'll make a push again.
Okay, so a couple kind of questions here at the end. Any advice that you have for people who are, I know you're retired, but people who are still in the trenches teaching every day?
Oh, a whole bunch of things come to mind. One is to find something that will act as a hobby or something that's just not musical, and have that be an important part of your life. We can be seduced by music education easily, and it will take every minute we will give it. It's just an unbelievable amount of responsibility to run a great program. And I once again stand in marvel at the people who do so well at this. But almost all of them that I've talked to also have found some balance in their life with an interest. It might be just walking the dog twice a day or whatever, but this is like my time. I can be quiet. I can think. I can get my mind into. I collect coins. That's my area of interest, and I can hold $50 that are 200 years old in my hand and think about who held them, and that's so far away from band experiences, and this is really important. And the other thing would be, and I give a full session on this topic of score preparation from the conductor's point of view, composer's point of view. We put these things together and we hand them off to the conductors on bended knee, saying, "Please don't mess up." We've poured ourselves into this piece. Some of my colleagues can do this over the weekend, and make a piece happen. And then we have to shut up and let our notation talk for us.
Yep.
And so study your scores. I go through like 12 points on this hour-long presentation about understanding what the score can show you. These are all decision points made by a composer to bring into existence something that did not exist. Mahler would say that his symphonies were worlds unto themselves. And if you think about the beginning of the first symphony, many of us know Mahler 1, and the strings open interval, a world can happen, even at grade 2, because it comes out of silence.
Mm-hmm.
And to have you understand that as the conductor, understand the decision points the composer might have made, all sorts of things are tucked within the notation there. And as you assimilate it and start to understand the tension leading into the cadencing before you resolve it and pull back a little bit, we can't show everything either. That's the other thing. We're really depending on your musicianship as well. So do not be afraid to apply a little bit of a retardando coming into the end of a phrase, etc. Be musical. It would be anal retentive for us to show everything. And I'm old enough to know that I've been schooled so many times by people who have conducted my music. I think I know the way it should go, and they'll do something to it, and I'll go, "Holy!" It's just, I didn't know that was in there, and they pulled that out of the score. So fun.
That's awesome. So can you name a piece or a composer right now that you think people should pay attention to?
Yeah, I made a quick list of the people that are making an impression on me. They're all sort of young, except for two of them. I'm going to start with two that are dead and are experiencing rebirth. They're both black composers coming out of the military band tradition, James Reese Europe and Alton Augustus Adams. And you can find arrangements and settings in modern publications now, and they're delightful marches written at the time, obviously, when Sousa was writing his marches, but not necessarily influenced completely by that sound that was going around. You hear some different harmonic moves happening and so on, some phrasing things that are interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so James Reese Europe and Alton Augustus Adams. I've been a big fan of Stillwater by Kalijah Dunton since that first came out. I did it right away with my band, right away. This was at the beginning of COVID. This was perfect. We were 9 feet apart. We filled the entire athletic facility practically, and I could hold Stillwater together. These kids have been in marching band. They know how to do this. That's the way I figured. And we've made some pretty good music happen with that. And I've done that piece many times since, and some other works of his. And I'm quite hopeful to watch him just grow as someone who really understands younger bands. High school bands can make that work and grow as a composer. And okay, Kalijah, come on, let's see what you got. Jocelyn Hagen, who I'm proud to say is a St. Olaf grad and known primarily in the choral world. She's just nailing it in the choral world. But she's got some really interesting band work as well. And I encourage us to try to find ways to have her voice come into our repertoire. Shirley Meyer, spelled M-I-E-R, is another one from up around here in the metro area. I've done maybe 3 or 4 of her pieces, and they're just delightful. They're really well written. We're presenting her piece Legacy at the ASBDA National Convention here next week. We play next Wednesday with the Minnesota Symphonic Winds. This is an adult group that I do. Aryaman Joshi, Joshi, is a student coming out of the St. Olaf program. He comes to us from India, and he's taking all of these influences that he has rhythmically primarily, but also melodically and harmonically, and melding them with Western traditions, and just coming up with delightful new ways of thinking about what we can do with our ensemble. So I'm quite heartened by the attention that we're getting from really fine composers.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.